The air in New York carried a strange mix that morning, freshly brewed coffee drifting from the small cafes on the corner, car horns echoing through the tall buildings, and the hurried footsteps of people who seemed to always be running late. It was a typical day on Fifth Avenue, a place where thousands of strangers crossed paths but hardly ever looked at one another. Among those strangers was Ethan, a 12-year-old boy with untidy brown hair and a backpack slung across his shoulder. He had been walking home from his Saturday tutoring class. His mom always insisted he take the bus, but Ethan loved walking. He liked observing people, listening to the rhythm of the city, and imagining stories about everyone he passed. As he walked, his sneakers tapping against the asphalt, Ethan noticed the crowd parting slightly ahead. Something unusual had happened. At first, he thought maybe it was just a street performer drawing attention, but then he saw her. An elderly woman with silver hair lay sprawled on the cold gray pavement. Her shopping bag had tipped over, spilling oranges that rolled across the street like little suns. The woman's eyes were closed, her body frighteningly still. People walked around her, some slowed down for a moment, some glanced quickly, but then kept moving. No one bent down to help. Ethan froze. His heart raced. He had never seen someone collapse before. For a second, fear paralyzed him, whispering that he was just a kid and someone else would step in. But no one did. Finally, Ethan dropped to his knees beside her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he asked, his voice trembling. The woman's lips moved slightly, a faint groan escaping. Relief washed over him. She was alive, but clearly in trouble. A man in a suit passed by, muttering, "Someone should call 911, but he didn't stop. Ethan's small hands shook as he pulled his phone out of his pocket. He had never called emergency services before. With a deep breath, he dialed. 911, what's your emergency? A calm voice answered. There's a woman on the ground. She collapsed. I'm on Fifth Avenue near the bookstore. Ethan stammered. Stay calm, young man, the operator said. Is she breathing? Ethan bent down, ear close to the woman's lips. He could feel faint breaths. Yes, but weak, he replied quickly. Good. Help is on the way. Stay with her, don't leave her alone. Can you tell me your name? Ethan, he whispered. All right, Ethan, you're doing great. Keep talking to her until help arrives. Ethan placed his trembling hand gently on the woman's shoulder. You're going to be okay. Help is coming, he whispered, unsure if she could hear him. Around him, people continued to pass. Some glanced with curiosity, others pulled out their phones to take pictures or videos, but no one knelt beside him. Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. Why was everyone ignoring her? Why was he the only one? Minutes felt like hours, but soon the wail of an ambulance pierced the city noise. Two paramedics rushed over, their equipment clattering. Ethan moved aside as they began working quickly, checking her pulse, attaching monitors, and preparing a stretcher. Kid, were you the one who called? One of the paramedics asked. Yes, Ethan nodded, his voice still shaky. You probably saved her life, the paramedic said, giving him a reassuring pat on the shoulder. Those words stuck to Ethan's heart. He had never thought of himself as someone capable of saving a life. He was just a boy who liked walking home, imagining stories about strangers. But today, the story had chosen him. As the ambulance pulled away with flashing lights, Ethan stood in the middle of the street, surrounded by people who had returned to their busy lives, as if nothing had happened. Yet for Ethan, everything had changed. He didn't know the woman's name. He didn't know if she would survive. But he knew one thing for certain. Sometimes, even when the whole world looks away, one small act of courage can make all the difference. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Ethan couldn't shake the image of her silver hair against the asphalt. He wondered who she was, if she had family, if anyone would sit by her side in the hospital. A strange ache filled his chest, a mixture of worry, sadness, and something else he couldn't quite name. What Ethan didn't know was that this single encounter would not only change his life but also the life of the woman he had saved. Their paths had crossed for a reason, and soon, both of them would discover why. The next morning, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the woman. The image of her pale face and silver hair haunted him. He had asked his mom if they could check the local hospital, but she was skeptical. Ethan, hospitals don't just give out patient information. And besides, you're just a kid, she said while buttering toast. But Mom, Ethan protested, what if she's all alone? What if no one knows she's there? His mother sighed. Ethan was stubborn, just like his late father, who had passed away 3 years ago. She saw the same fire in his eyes now, a determination that wouldn't let go once it had started burning. By afternoon, Ethan had convinced her. They went to St. Mary's Hospital, a large brick building near Central Park. Ethan felt nervous as they walked inside, the smell of disinfectant filling his nose. At the reception desk, Ethan hesitated, then stepped forward. Yesterday, on 5th Avenue, I called 911 for a woman who collapsed. Silver hair, maybe in her 70s. Is she here? The receptionist gave him a sympathetic look but shook her head. I'm sorry, honey, we can't share details about patients. Ethan's shoulders slumped. He turned to leave when a nurse passing by overheard. Wait, are you the boy from 5th Avenue? She asked. Ethan blinked. Yes, that was me. The nurse smiled softly. She's here. She's stable now. Would you like to see her? I think she'd want to meet you. His mom looked surprised, but she nodded. Go ahead, Ethan. Just for a few minutes. The nurse led him down a quiet hallway, stopping at a room where sunlight streamed through the blinds. Inside, the silver-haired woman lay propped up on pillows, her frail frame covered by hospital blankets. Her eyes fluttered open when Ethan stepped inside. You, her voice was raspy, but her gaze softened. You're the boy. Ethan nodded shyly. I called for help. I didn't know if you'd make it. A tear slid down the woman's cheek. You saved me. Ethan moved closer, pulling up a chair. Are you okay now? She gave a weak chuckle. Old age has its tricks. My heart isn't what it used to be. But thanks to you, I'm still here. There was a silence, not uncomfortable, but filled with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Ethan asked, What's your name? Margaret, she replied softly. Margaret Hayes. Ethan repeated it in his head. Margaret. It suited her somehow, dignified, but gentle. Do you have any family I can call? Ethan asked. Margaret's expression darkened. She turned her gaze toward the window. No one who would come. Ethan frowned. But, doesn't anyone care? She sighed. I had a son. He moved away years ago. We haven't spoken in a long time. My husband passed many years back. And friends, well, they disappear as time goes on. That's the thing about growing old, Ethan. Sometimes the world forgets you. The words cut deep into Ethan's heart. He couldn't imagine being so alone. For a moment, he saw his own grandmother's face, who lived back in Ohio. What if she collapsed like this? And no one stopped to help. The thought made his stomach twist. Then I'll visit you, Ethan blurted out suddenly. If no one else will, I will. Margaret blinked at him in surprise, then smiled, a fragile, grateful smile that lit her tired eyes. You're a strange boy, she whispered. But a good one. Over the next week, Ethan kept his promise. After school, he would stop by St. Mary's. Sometimes he brought small gifts, magazines, crossword puzzles, even a tiny potted plant he bought with his allowance. Margaret began to look forward to those visits, her loneliness easing with every laugh and story they shared. One evening, Ethan asked her, Why were you on 5th Avenue that day? Margaret chuckled softly. I was buying oranges. They remind me of my childhood in Florida. My father had an orchard. Funny, isn't it? I collapsed chasing something as simple as fruit. But then her face grew serious. I think I was meant to meet you, Ethan. Life works in mysterious ways. Ethan didn't fully understand, but he nodded. He felt the same strange pull, that this connection was no accident. One night, after returning home from the hospital, Ethan overheard his mom on the phone. Yes, he keeps visiting her. I don't know, maybe it's good for him. He's been so withdrawn since his dad passed. Ethan realized something. Maybe Margaret wasn't the only one being saved. Maybe he needed her just as much as she needed him. But as Margaret's health began to improve, a shadow lingered in the back of Ethan's mind. What if she collapsed again? What if next time, he wasn't there? For now, though, all he could do was sit by her side, listen to her stories, and remind her, and himself, that even in a city full of strangers, kindness could build a bridge between two lonely hearts. The hospital room had become a small world of its own. Each afternoon, sunlight poured through the blinds and cast golden stripes across the walls, as if the universe was reminding Margaret that time was still moving forward. And every afternoon, without fail, Ethan appeared, sometimes with his schoolbooks, sometimes with small treats, but always with a smile that seemed to melt away the weight of loneliness. One rainy evening, while thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, Ethan sat beside Margaret's bed, fiddling with the straps of his backpack. He hesitated, then asked, "Margaret, can I ask you something? Why haven't you spoken to your son in so long?" Margaret's fingers tightened on the blanket. For a moment, her eyes clouded, as though a storm had rolled in behind them. She looked away, staring at the raindrops crawling down the window. "It's not a story I tell often," she murmured. "But maybe you should hear it. Maybe I need to say it out loud." Ethan leaned closer, sensing the heaviness in her voice. "I was born in Florida," Margaret began softly, "in a small town where everyone knew each other. My father owned an orange orchard, and the smell of blossoms would fill the air each spring. It was a simple life, but a happy one. When I was 22, I married Richard Hayes. He was strong, charming, and he dreamed of building a future bigger than our little town. So we moved north, to New York." She paused, a faint smile flickering. "Richard worked hard, and I stayed home with our son, Daniel. He was everything to me. Bright eyes, curious mind. For years, we were a family that laughed at the dinner table, took walks in Central Park, and dreamed together. But life doesn't always stay kind." Her voice grew quieter. "Richard passed away suddenly. A heart attack. Daniel was just 15. Losing his father hardened him. He grew angry, distant. And her voice cracked, I didn't know how to reach him. I was drowning in grief myself, and he felt abandoned, even though I was right there." Ethan swallowed hard. The ache in Margaret's words reminded him of his own father, gone too soon. "Daniel left home after high school," Margaret continued, tears welling. "He said he needed to escape, to build a life where memories of his father wouldn't haunt him. I begged him to stay, but he wouldn't listen. For years, I wrote letters, left voicemails, sent holiday cards. He never replied. Eventually, I stopped trying. Maybe he hated me. Maybe I failed him. I don't know." Silence filled the room, heavy as the storm outside. Ethan reached out and placed his small hand over hers. "You didn't fail him. You were hurting too. Sometimes people run away because they don't know how else to deal with pain." Margaret's lips trembled. "But what if he never forgives me? What if he never even thinks of me anymore?" Ethan thought for a long moment. "I think he does. Somewhere, deep down. I think kids always remember their moms. Even when they pretend not to." Margaret studied him, surprised by the wisdom in his young voice. Then she smiled weakly. "You sound too old for 12. Ethan shrugged. "Losing people makes you grow up faster." The words hung in the air between them, unspoken truths binding their hearts. Over the next days, Margaret shared more pieces of her past with Ethan. Memories of Daniel as a boy, of the orchard in Florida, of the love she once had with Richard. Ethan listened intently, as if piecing together a puzzle. Each story revealed not just Margaret's history, but her deep well of longing and regret. One afternoon, she pulled out a small wooden box from her bedside drawer. Inside was a faded photograph of a young boy with messy dark hair and a mischievous smile. "That's Daniel," she whispered. "He was about your age when this was taken." Ethan studied the photo, then looked up at her. "He looks a little like me." Margaret chuckled softly. "Maybe that's why I feel so connected to you. You remind me of him, before the world stole his laughter." For Ethan, the photograph stirred something new. He couldn't shake the thought. What if Daniel was still out there, somewhere in the same city, living his life not knowing his mother had nearly died alone on a busy street? That night, lying awake in his bed, Ethan made himself a promise. If Margaret's son wouldn't come to her, maybe Ethan could find him. Maybe he could help fix what time and pain had broken. Because in Ethan's heart, Margaret wasn't just a stranger anymore. She was family. And family deserved to be whole again.